Welcome to the Chase Merrell podcast. I am your host, Chase Merrell, and we are all about helping people get freed up from what's holding them back so they can build up who they were made to be. On today's episode, I have my friend Glenn Garvin with me. Glenn has been in my life before I was alive. He was one of my dad's good friends throughout his early childhood, growing into his middle school, high school years more so, and was even in my parents' wedding. And he dedicated me as I was born as a baby to the Lord. This man has been such a huge impact in my dad's life over the years, and I recognize that as my dad has made a huge impact in my life, it's also been the byproduct of other men who have invested into him. And Glenn would be at the top of that list. Glenn is a lead pastor in Lakewood, California with his wife, Robin. They've been in ministry for years, have been married for 40 years. They've got 3 kids and grandkids. And the thing about him is the authenticity and the joy that radiates out of who he is. Like, his smile is one of those contagious smiles that's impossible not to smile back when he's smiling at you. And man, he just is the real deal. His encouragement and support of me and my calling and my family over the years has been awesome. And I'm super thankful for the time we got to spend today. I know today's conversation is going to encourage and inspire you. If you want to help us continue to make an impact with this podcast week in and week out, consider joining our new Patreon community. For as little as a cup of coffee a month, you can be a part of helping us get the message and mission of the podcast out to more people more effectively. This is a way that we can come together as a community, and you'll get access to behind the scenes stuff, additional resources and content, and so much more for just as little as $5 a month. You can head over to chasemerrell.com and click Patreon to jump in and get started. Now let's jump into today's conversation. Well, here we go. I have my friend Glenn Garvin, Pastor Glenn Garvin, best friend of my dad, Larry Merrell, in different seasons throughout his life, and so much more with me today here on the podcast. Welcome, Pastor Glenn. Thanks for being here with me, man. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Chase.
Yeah, dude, so cool
to be here.
To have a moment today and have you part of the 52 Project, having these conversations with 52 different people who have made an impact on my life. As we just kind of jumped into it a few minutes ago, there's a lot of history here. And it goes back to before I was born. So the impact you had on my life was pre-birth impact throughout. But you are have been a longtime friend of my mom and dad's, and specifically my dad's throughout life. And I believe you were, I'm thinking they got married in 1983. So you guys were friends before that.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think, were you in his wedding?
Yeah,
you were in his wedding. I mean, that's the kind of, we're talking about, like,
he was in mine, I was in his.
We're talking about, like,
the weddings.
And so there's just a lot of that there, but
that's how far back it goes. We can't even remember. Like, I don't know. There was a wedding.
Yes,
I think I was in it.
There was. Well, and they're celebrating. In fact, just in about a week from when this is released, or a week and a half from when this is released, they'll be celebrating 40 years, man, of marriage. Insane. And you guys were pretty close, right? Or you guys either married right before or right after that?
Yeah, we got married in January, and then they got married, coming up. I don't remember. No. Yeah.
It was September 10th. You guys got married the same year?
Yep.
No way. I didn't know that. I didn't realize that. So
it was busy.
40 for you too, man. Congratulations. That's a huge deal.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. So with that, for people listening that have no clue who you are, could you just give them a snapshot and just an introduction to who you are, where you're at right now in life, and like what you're doing, who you're connected to, just so people can know some context as we jump into today?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I am currently, Rob and I, we've been married 40 years. We were talking about how really this kind of encapsulates the entire of, like, what a great life is to be married to the same woman, and in love with the same woman, and committed there. We have 3 adult children, David, Matthew, and Janae. They're all married. David's married to Allie, and then Matthew's married to Fran, and Janae's married to Alan. And then Dave and Allie got us Millie, our little granddaughter, and she's coming up on 3 years old.
Wow.
And then Janae and Alan, our youngest, have 2 girls, and so that gives us our 2 grands there. And Ruby's going to be 5, and Lucy's about 2.5. So that's Really, that's the things that count. The
Yeah.
things I do, as you already know, it's like, yeah, I do them. I've done them.
Yeah.
They kind of come and go. I'm currently lead pastor. I joke with our congregation that I am the CSO. I'm the chief servant officer of the
Let's go.
church.
I love it.
So they think that's funny, and they kind of mock me about it, especially when they want something. They're
Yeah.
like, "Well, you said you're the chief servant officer." So I think that's what we do, anyways.
Yeah.
That we are CSOs in the church. We're servants, ministers.
Yeah.
So I am currently doing that, and I've been doing that since October of 2020. And we got a call back to our home church many years ago. So
Yeah.
we grew up and got married and really kind of started life in Lakewood very young before we had kids, and lived there for 25 years, Lakewood, California, had the 3 kids that there, all that stuff. And then we were on staff at a church for 18 years. So long haul.
Yeah.
I just love deep commitments. I like long hauls. Probably would have stayed. God ended up calling me to a nonprofit, Royal Family Kids Camps. I'm hoping it's still the nation's largest camps for foster kids.
Yeah.
And so it did 14 years with Royal Family Kids. It was amazing. Got back into the church, got fired from a church. You probably heard about that. That was interesting, being fired in my old age, and then getting back on staff at another church with a friend of ours, and thinking, wow, this introduction back into the church was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And then now lead pastor. So there you go.
Yeah.
We're currently living in Santa Ana, California. So this is my hood. I got like 13% Mexican in me. I'm holding on to it tight. So I'm living in Mexico right now in Santa Ana, California.
Let's go. I mean, that's a life well lived right there. I mean, that's a lot of experience packed within those, for 40-ish years. Like that's
a lot going on,
man. Man, well, just to think about some of the beginnings of relationship. I mean, so I've on this podcast, I've had my dad, Larry, as a guest, as at one of my 52, and I've talked about him kind of in period, throughout different points. In fact, we just celebrated his 60th birthday as well.
Yeah,
it was your birthday recently too. I don't know how old you are, but if you can or
I'm
can't.
a couple of years older,
okay.
So yeah. I knew your dad. We swapped. That's why we felt so bad. We swapped birthday calls. And
Okay.
Larry said, he's like, gee, we don't talk as much as we said. I said, I know, man. I know we don't.
Yeah.
And felt bad. And then I called back and I get voicemail. He calls me. We got voicemail. It's like, oh, yeah. But yeah, that's the way it goes.
Well, he's been such a just a massive, figure in my life throughout all of the, upbringing, but then well beyond into my adult years and continuing to this day. And I recognize over the years how vital it is, and how much of the people that were in his life around some formidable seasons were a part of that, who he is, because of the fact that like it was stuff that had to be contributed from investment relationally from other people, and you've been and were one of those huge contributions in his life. I recognize that, so I go, man, when I think about making a difference, man, this guy's made the biggest difference. And then who's made a difference in his life? Well, Glenn Garvin would be up at the top of that list, and it's not just because of the, like, there's like the mentor kind of impact, the leader, the father figure impact. Yeah. And then there's like the brother friendship kind of impact. And I recognize that at times that piece seems more rare in life. I think it's easier to find those up and those down in regards to like being poured into or pouring in, to others. It's harder to find really quality, rock solid, long, sustaining relational friendship people with those brothers or those sisters that are arm in arm through life, that continue to be there for you, champion you, call you out, sharpen all that stuff. And I recognize that you've been one of those figures for my dad in his life. And that, I just, even when I was younger, I mean, I can remember phone calls. I can remember getting excited when I would hear you guys talk on the phone. There was something about when my dad would get off the phone with Glenn Garvin, he was better. He left the phone call better. He had more joy. You could tell there was like it was, he could totally be himself and be loved, but also like whatever you guys communicated about, there was some kind of like challenge or sharpening of like, you know, man, keep going, or just, it was good. It was something that I recognized was really important in his life, and it snowballed into my life. And what I still see to this day is those kind of relationships being so valuable. So even though the you mentioned the consistency of communication, the fact that you guys could just pick up the phone and pick up right where you were 10, 15, 20 years ago is part of what I think is the evidence of the kind of relationship that you've invested in over years. So thank you for that, because it's a big deal. When I was born, you mentioned this too, which was a big journey as well for my parents. When I was born, you dedicated me.
Yeah.
Like baby dedicated.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is nuts when I think about it. Having, 4 kids of my own now, and having the opportunity to, have baby dedications for each one of them. And, man, so you've been in this.
I had to look up your name, find out the meaning.
Wow. Wow.
I had to pick a verse that was appropriate, that was prophetically for your whole life.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
About you chasing after God.
Come on. Let's go.
I know.
Come on.
Look at that. It works.
Yeah, there you go. That's awesome. Oh, man. So, part of one of the things that I want to acknowledge is that there's something about being in ministry for a long time that, throughout my conversations, even up to this point, with a few other people that have been or are currently still pastors or in ministry, there seems to be this I would say a common trajectory of a lot of people in the ministry space don't finish well or finish healthy. And maybe those are both the same thing, but to some degree they either burn out, or there's something bad that happens that makes them burn out, or that makes them have to kind of move into something else. There are times God totally calls to different directions, and all that's good. And then there are just times where there's no big moral failure, or there's no whatever, but they just end that season or whatever, and they're just like, I want nothing to do with this, and I don't either I don't have a love for Jesus that burns hot anymore, or all of that world is even just kind of up in the air. And so when I take a step back and I look around me and I go, who's in this still, and who's been in this for a long time? I got a little friend with me in the podcast today. Yeah. My son Weston. For those watching, you can see, and those listening, he's been drawing me some pictures. Dude, that's so awesome. I love it. I'll show it real quick to everybody. This is a Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, of course.
Go Hawks.
Oh my goodness. There's legacy right there.
There you go. Football season is upon us. When I look around me, I don't see a lot of people that are really, bottom line, they're doing what you're doing, which is, they're still in it, and they still want to be in it. I'm sure that's not always how you feel, but for the large part, and they're still loving Jesus. And then we'll talk about the family component in a second, but I mentioned it earlier on before we recorded too. Just, you got family who are still in relationship with you, and all of those things seem to be very rare in today's day of ministry and life when it comes to those that have been in it a while. And so I'd love to just maybe kind of, even before diving into the full picture of like ministry right now with where you are, maybe even could you give us a piece of your story a little bit, and just for people that just kind of even more context to the Glenn Garvin story?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I wasn't that has a big part of our conversation, especially when it comes to just what you're doing now currently, the church pastoring, and what I'm doing now currently, pastoring. But I did not grow up in church, and so I have defined it now, rather than talking about it being abusive or being a difficult, I just call it's just chaotic. Yeah. And as you know, when your life is, or when you're little, when you're a kid and your life is chaotic everywhere, it feels unsafe. And that's pretty much how it went. So I've had 2 moms and 3 dads, and they have now all died. They're all gone. Birth mom, adopted, gave me up out of the hospital. And I was raised by a grandpa and my birth dad. They could not really pull that off, and so they gave me up for adoption. I was adopted at 4 years old, and then the family that adopted me, they were on their second try. My adopted mother had been divorced, and she had a little girl, and that's my older stepsister. And then they wanted to she wanted her to build a new family unit, so she married this guy. And they wanted to quickly get a family together. And so they adopted me. And the hope was that adopting a little boy, my adopted dad, it would straighten him out because he was an alcoholic. He'd come out of the Navy. He had been a really heavy drinker. And it's like, we're just, let's try to fix this guy. My mom's opinion is like, let's get married. Let's get a family. That'll fix you. I mean, wow. Think about this now. You're not even drunk. You're sober, and you're like, man, that doesn't sound like a good plan.
No.
So they tried it, and I get in the picture, and so we've got, I'm adopted in. I got my older stepsister, and it's just, it just gets crazy because my adopted dad just could not handle that. So his drinking and his violence towards my mother, towards my stepsister, just began to really grow. He was never violent towards me at all. A number of times it was scary because he was drunk. So when we were driving and he was drunk, or when we're doing things, I mean, that was scary, but he was never violent towards me. But that was my home life, going through from 4 years old all the way up to about 10 years old. And my mom, there's a lot of stories in there, but my mom realized he is not going to make it. He was becoming more violent. They actually had another little girl in 1970. That would be my little stepsister for me, but she feels like full sister.
Yeah.
That's Gina. I don't know if you ever remember or had anything to do with her, but so now there's this whole thing, and my mom's like, he's getting violent, and she had to kind of pull the ripcord, and they got a divorce when I was probably about 10 years old, right after my sister was born. But that escalated. And it turns out when I was about 12, so this would be probably around 72, my dad just depressed and just really losing all sense of reality. He ends up taking his own life. And so there's suicide, there's alcoholism, there's all this stuff is going on in my life. And I don't know what in the world to do about it. And so, like I said, church wasn't really a big part of our life. My mom ended up trying to get us into a church. She got us into a couple, I want to say kooky Pentecostal churches. I won't name the denominations, but we got in. And yeah. I only say that because, man, they were really out there, man. They were really flamboyant and just loud, and, it's all that. So it didn't, I was thinking, wow, I don't even know what this is all about. And then coming into, I was 15 years old, and my mom thought, hey, this, I needed better friends. Is what she said. We were currently going to a church. This is where your dad grew up, basically.
Wow.
Dad, your brothers, your grandparents on your dad's side, they were all in this church called Cerritos Assembly. And your dad and your uncles were very, very much a part of this church. I've got stories, Chase. I've got a lot of stories.
I don't doubt it.
So they were part of this church, and they were having a winter camp. This would have been around like 1977, and very cool. They did a winter camp. My mom said, you should go. It's got a longer story and context, but I go. I don't want to be there. I walk on the parking lot, to go to camp, and I don't know a soul. One of the guys says, hey, sit with me on the bus. And he was really nice. His name was Tim. And I'm like, sure. So I sit with him. We get up there Friday night. It's this totally 70s. I mean, it is just a vibe, man. It's the crashing wave of the 70s, the Jesus Revolution. I don't know if you got to see that movie.
Yeah, for sure.
It is definitely the tail end of the Jesus movement. So the vibe was very hippie, guitars and long hair and a lot of sandals and shorts. Sounds like today, right?
Yeah, totally.
And so, but it was cool. We went up to this little this resort place called Oak Knoll Lodge, which is actually on Discovery Channel. It's actually on a program where some gal had refurbished it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, it's up in Big Bear.
Yeah.
We go up there Friday night. Everybody is like totally kumbaya. They're singing, they're playing the guitar. These young people are raising their hands. I'm in the back. I'm like, what is going on? This is crazy, because I couldn't find adults making them do this. They were just there,
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, wow, there was this real sense like, oh my goodness, this is real to them. This is their thing. And I was really just kind of caught off guard from that. That was Friday night. And then Saturday, this is where your dad comes in. Your dad is your dad, man. And your uncles, they're just, them.
Yep.
They were so much fun. I mean, all the guys, they just took me in. We just had a blast. We just caused trouble together. We laughed. I was just a stranger to them, and they just took me in. And it was really, really cool to go like, these guys are normal. They're fun. I don't even understand how or what the church has to do in their life, but they're just real.
Yeah.
That's going on in my head on a Saturday. And then Saturday night, they have another service, right? They got this worship thing going on. And it was in that moment, they're doing the same thing. They're singing the songs. The young people are raising their hands. It's in that moment that right there, I'm looking at my own life and I'm like, man, my life's a wreck. I don't have anything good going on. Nothing in my past. And I can't even tell you the dark cloud, the dark curtain. I had no future, Chase. I couldn't envision anything in my future because it was all bad. I'd come from bad stock. I was a bad kid. I'd done bad things. I was part of a bad family. I have all these traits. I got alcoholism. I got suicide. I got all this stuff. I got multiple divorce relationships. They're all bad. And I was like, God, my life was just a wreck. And in these moments, I go over to the side of this little lodge, and I get under this table, and right there, Oak Knoll Lodge, I get under the table, and I'm just processing the difference between seeing folks like your dad and your mom and the youth group just being themselves. And I know that there's something going on with them. Anyways, I'm just there under the table. And then out of nowhere, this voice says, give me your life and I will be your dad. And I could just, I didn't audibly hear it. It wasn't from me. And in my head, I just hear this and I'm like, what? And there was something familiar about it, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. But I argued with the voice and I'm like, no, I'm not worth it. I have nothing to give you. I have no talents. I have nothing to give you. The voice just repeated, give me your life, I'll be your dad. Third time, voice says that, and I just broke. And I said yes. I just completely give my life to you. And there was just this moment where my life is kind of flashing before my eyes, and all the things up until that point, I had not experienced guilt. A lot of people, they have no idea. It's like I had not really ever grappled with guilt, because it's like I just didn't care. I didn't care what anybody thought.
Yeah,
I didn't have it.
Yeah,
I did stuff wrong. I blamed others for that. I mean, I'm 15, but I'm still, it's like I have no. So I'm feeling this sense of guilt and loss, and like, wow, I'm just a turd. All that's happening, and I commit my life to the voice, this voice of God. And that was my journey.
Wow.
That's what I start. So I wake up Sunday morning, all the stories you've heard, I wake up lighter. I feel lighter. I feel happy. I have no idea what's happened. I wonder if it's going to stick. I wonder if it's real. And Sunday goes, and I'm just like, this is amazing. And the friendships are right there. All the friendships, many of them are still intact, Chase. Many of the friends your dad and your mom have, and I share too, they're still intact. I still talk to a number of them.
Yeah.
And so those were just like amazing. That Sunday, Monday was a day off, it was over the weekend. So we're still at the thing, that's where Robin and I met. That's where it was just incredible. I mean, I met Jesus and I met my future wife on the same retreat. Can you imagine if I had missed that?
Yeah. I mean, and then all of the subsequent domino effect things in your life
Lots of
right?
domino effects. Yeah.
Man,
So
that
I
is,
come
that's
I come
crazy.
back to school, then I won't, because I got a lot of stories. I come back to school on Tuesday, and I'm depressed. I mean, I'm going back to school. I go to
Sure.
Los Alamos High School, and I'm like, oh man, that was an incredible weekend. And I'm still thinking, was it real? I'm still thinking, this, did something really happen? Because I feel very different, and I go to school. I meet with my buddies, got 3 or 4 guys that I meet with, and that day it just happened to land on the day that I was the one designated, because we rotated. I was the one that was going to steal lunch for them that day. So we would rotate this, so in case we got caught, on all this. So I go to the cafeteria line, I buy my one burrito, and I'm going to steal 3 more burritos from my friends. And I'm like, okay, we have this system. And I'm putting these burritos in my pocket, and I'm being really cool and suave. And I'm going to buy one. I'm getting through the line. And then out of nowhere, this voice says, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, well, I don't even know what you're talking about. What am I doing? It's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm getting lunch." It's like, "You're stealing burritos." Yeah, that's what I'm doing for my friends. I mean, this is how it works. The voice says, "Put them back." And I'm like, no, 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 no. Putting things back is way more dangerous than stealing them. It's harder. I'm not putting them back. The voice says, "Put the burritos back." That's stealing. I'm like, oh, get the burritos. I put them back in there. I'm angry. What in the world? Get up, pay for my burrito, go back to my friends. They're like, "Hey, where's the food, man?" And I'm like, "Well, here's the story." I tell what happened over the weekend, because that's what happened. And I tell them, it's like, I had the burritos, and then God told me put them back. It's stealing. And I didn't want to disappoint him. I didn't want to do what he said. Don't do this. I said, okay, I'm not gonna do it. It was the wildest thing. The look on their faces
Wow.
was like, "Are you kidding me?" Like, "God, what?" Over the weekend, and God told you to put burritos back? You're like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, this is how it works. So they later on that week they met with me, and they said, "Hey, we kind of talked, and we think maybe we don't think we should hang out anymore." I'm like, yeah, I get it. No,
Wow.
no hard feelings, right? I feel the same.
Yeah.
I feel the same. I can't hang out with you guys if this is what we're gonna do.
Yeah.
That was like immediate, Chase. That was immediately
First few
after,
days.
like
Yeah.
the
That,
Tuesday back to come, coming back from school. So
wow. I mean, so that shift was, it was, yeah, immediately begin to shift
oh yeah,
your everyday life for
oh yeah,
friendships and relationships. And
everything. 2 years, man, I've gone through discipline, and I hate discipline. I didn't have father figures. They were just a wreck. They're a mess. I didn't have that. And God's disciplining me, and he's teaching me obedience, and I'm a hard head. I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this. And I want to let you know that as much as I appreciate the gathering of the young people that I was in, this is your dad, your mom, and all the other folks that you probably heard about. I appreciated it, but my relationship with Christ started with a direct revelation, a direct connection, where God said, "Give me your life, and I'll be your dad." So it cut through all the minutia of
yeah.
everything that you would know of what you and what my own kids have grown up with.
Yeah.
I didn't have any of it. I heard the voice. I said yes. That voice led me and guided me, told me what was right and what was wrong, pummeled me with discipline. And so that's my relationship with Christ. There's nothing that's going to shake that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't, I don't even have words to explain. The church is not going to take me off. I'm not going to walk away from that relationship.
Right.
My own sin, my own failures. Like, I'm not walking away from that.
Yeah.
It was so powerful. It was so pure.
Yeah.
That's it. And it lasts,
Yeah.
it lasted.
Yeah. So that is, for one, it's super powerful, right? And the reality of what you just described as well is, I don't hear as many testimonies like that nowadays. They're still happening, absolutely 100%, but there are more,
Yeah.
and maybe it's because I have been more raised in the ministry or the church world for a lot of my life, because my parents experienced like similar things that, you did. And so their foundation of relationship and marriage and then parenting was being built on, okay, well, we have some of this in our upbringing as well, right? In some, but like we want to try to raise our family and kids. So I was brought up into that space. And I had a pretty radical, crazy. I don't know if I've shared it on this podcast yet, but I've shared it in some other places. But like I had my radical encounter with God, where it was not audible voice, but audible voice, was in 8th grade at a winter camp that we just moved to Rockland, California from Mammoth Lakes, California. I didn't know anybody, and met Jesus. I had been raised in, right, knew it because of being with, but that was the night for me. Became real. Was that Friday night at winter camp, and I got rocked. Didn't want to be there, but I got rocked. Met my best friend on the bus. Eventually became my best friend. He was the best man at my wedding. His name's Riley Silva. And then at that night at dinner before the service, saw this pretty girl sitting at the high school freshman girls table. As an 8th grader, I wasn't allowed to go over there. And that one of those girls, that girl was Holly Delaney at the time. Now Merrell, my wife of 11 years. So all these parallels, I didn't realize that. I'm even thinking about your story. There's a lot of that moment for me. And then Friday night, I just got rocked. It was God was like, I'm calling you to lay your whole life down for me, and I'll lead you, and I'll take care of the mission and purpose. And then from the rest of that point till now, it's been somewhat of an attempt to pursue and chase after that with everything that Absolutely. I've got. And yet what there are, it seems to be, I hear what you're saying, and I almost want to try to help you. I want you to almost try to like press into it more. What you're saying in essence is nobody can take from you what you experienced personally with the Lord, in the sense of even the difficult things that you could face with those around you who misrepresent or don't represent God or the church or whatever. They don't represent it well.
Absolutely.
You're saying they weren't the ones that built my relationship.
That's right.
And so they can't be the ones that break it.
Right.
And yet there are a lot of people that maybe have a different story of like my story was more within the fabric of the upbringing and has felt more like it's been built by the different youth pastors or the different, whatever. Yeah. And that's where I do think I think there hasn't been a lot of the same encounter like we've seen in previous years in the world of ministry and church. And I see that within the next generation as a youth pastor twice in the last 12 years, for, 3 to 5 year chunks, that I recognized, man, we had so much, even in my generation, so much more encounter opportunity with God's presence, with just getting in a place where we could hear the not audible voice, but the voice of God. Yeah. And it seems like there's not a lot of that happening as much as it used to be. And I wonder how much that's impacting the church and people's relationships or lack thereof with God. What are you seeing from somebody who's been in it and been kind of, 40 years of being in ministry per se and nonprofit work. You've seen it all to a degree. What are you seeing in that up and down, and maybe even where things are now?
Well, I think it'd be best to tell you Robin, my wife, she has a 180-degree different story.
Right.
So she has from birth, from early on. I mean, she probably was in church just, days or a week after being born. And she was raised in church. Right. I mean, she every night, every time the doors were open, her dad was a pastor. He was a pastor all the way through, all the way along up until retiring. And then now he's still pastoring, right? But he's not officially pastoring, but he's still called on. He's speaking, he's engaged in the church, and it's just a very, very different experience, as well as her brother and sister. You probably know Renee.
Yep.
You may know Ron. So these are the 3 children of her dad, Frank Triggs. And it's a whole different study, Chase. It's a study that they were all raised in the church.
Yeah.
and her relationship with Jesus was solidified as a young. Actually, she was 4 years old, so she had capacity at 4 years old. I didn't even have capacity to really know anything at 4 years old. She had the capacity to start this walk with Jesus at 4 years old, understanding why and how he died for her.
Yeah.
And then there she goes. She just begins to develop. She's filled, she's baptized in the Holy Spirit. She's got issues that go on, but none of them touch this deep faith. So she has that, and so does her brother and sister. So you're really juxtaposing my experience with hers, and they're baffled, honestly. Her and her brother and sister, they're baffled by it. I'm baffled by it because I came through a relationship directly with God. People always say, well, experiences. You mentioned this, experiences with God. It's like, oh, we don't believe that these experiences with God are good. These experiences with God are not what it's all about. It's like, well, I don't know how any relationship could survive without that experiences.
Yep.
And I don't think the spiritual one is any different.
Yep.
But God took me through everything, took me through the Bible, took me through all the discipline and obedience. And so Robin had that in way better healthy training through the church. I did not have it. I didn't even know my way around the Bible. I got lost all the time when the pastors called out scriptures. I had no idea where they were. I had to go to the index and look up the page, and by that time they were done.
Right.
And I was frustrated.
Right.
I didn't know anything.
No Bible app on the iPhones back then.
No Bible app. I mean, I didn't have anything. So
yeah. And I got
all that training, all that biblical understanding that came later. I mean, God started with the kind of the Hebrews. I think it's Hebrews 12. He started with the Hebrews 12. It's like, no, you need discipline. You need to learn one thing only. What is that? You need to learn to obey me.
Yeah.
When I tell you no, it's no.
Yeah.
When I tell you to do something, I expect you to do it.
Yeah.
And when I didn't do it, he quit talking.
Yeah.
It was simple.
Yeah.
I'm like, whoa, he's serious about this.
Yeah.
Anyways, experiences in God and with God were huge in my life, and they became very, very much so in Robin's life as well.
Yeah.
I think probably our nearest theory is, as parents, Chase, we felt like if we got you and your brother, I know your brother Landon.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
For
okay.
sure.
So if we got my kids, if we got you in church, that in fact was the best and safest connection to Jesus.
Yeah.
And we've had a lot of talk and discussion, like, maybe that was too much dependency on that.
Sure.
Like if we could just get you immersed in the church and immersed in the studying the Bible and immersed in the culture and immersed in the regularity and the commitment. We always made you go to church when you were younger.
Oh yeah.
We did, our kids. Of
Well,
course,
and I gotta take a pause to shout out Pastor Robin as an OG because of the fact that in my because when I was 4 years old, from four to six, if you will. No, I take that back because we moved back after I turned 7. So right around 7, but it was before then. So 7 was I would begin to become, my oldest is 7, going to be 8. So this is the year. And I'm seeing it through his eyes now as he's involved in our church and learning a ton about Jesus and the Bible. But Robin, as the kids pastor director in that season at Life Center, where we were going to church for that 1 year, we went back to Lakewood, and what she put together to help create an experience for younger kids to want to be there and learn about Jesus was massive. Like, even though it was later that I really made the decision that really meant something now to this day. The foundation was being like, from her gift. The way, she's there. I remember there were times where I was like, I couldn't get to church fast enough when it came to just that age, from kid bucks and the puppet stuff that she was going to do and the songs we were going to sing together. It was like, it was lights out, man. So anyway, just
you were
Robin.
You were a very excitable little guy.
I was, man. And then you
were full of energy. You were intense from that moment I saw you.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. But I had to give her a shout out because that was a big part of that team. So, okay. So,
Very cool.
so you're talking about your kids and the immersion into the church being like, okay,
Yes.
from our experience.
Right. And so you know how it is in ministry. We were all in ministry. In other words, our kids became a part of the church, and that was like there in terms of parenting, we're doing dual duty by pastoring in churches and teaching and leading every single week and probably multiple times. We're doing all these things, and we are doing this with our children. So they are in the kids experience, just same one you just talked about. They were in all the plays, Chase.
Yeah. Right.
They were in all the kids crusades.
Yep.
You know, we would not let them win certain awards because they were related to Robin and I,
Right.
you know, and they got mad. It's like, no, you're not going to win that because people think we cheat. You're not going to win it. They were so mad when they won it naturally. It's like, no, we're not going to let you get that. We're just doing everything we can. But at the same time, we were probably depending upon that church experience to be that experience in their life.
Yeah.
And giving them all the things that we believed were necessary, all the tools necessary. But we did not know and didn't know how to look and say, where is their private, where is their personal experience? And we know as kids, it's a very simple method. I mean, they're reading the scriptures, they're listening to the songs. We had all the Christian things. You know, we wouldn't let them watch Ninja Turtles because they're demonic. We wouldn't.
Yeah. I just made a reference to Rugrats the other day in one of my sermons. I wasn't allowed to watch Rugrats with Angelica because Angelica had a bad attitude, and my parents didn't want me to.
That's evil. Yeah. I mean, Robin and I, we laugh now because, you know, it's like when Harry Potter hit the scene, we're like, no, you're not reading that. They didn't read it until they were adults. So we were in that crowd of like, no, you're not doing this because that's of the world, you know? And I'm telling you, but that was right. We felt like we were doing right. But what was really going on is we were not attending to as much as we'd like to their soul and attending to where are you at? And one of the things that we felt like we tried to communicate, but now we hear feedback, we probably didn't as much, is it's more important for you to lean in and listen to what the Holy Spirit is telling you rather than the church rules, laws, culture, all these. It's more important. You need to follow what God says through the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
If he says no, I don't care what your question is. You don't do it. I don't care if it's legal. I don't care if it's acceptable. If he says no, you don't do it. If you could somehow convince the Holy Spirit, you know the word, he says, okay, you're okay, you can do this. Okay.
Yeah.
Responsibilities on God leading you. We live our life like that. We don't know if we impress that enough on our kids. Like, don't answer to the church.
Yeah.
Answer to God.
Yeah.
Don't be led by the church and the way the church goes, because we got a lot of systems. We look back, we're like, man, we got a lot of things that we got out of line, really. Listen to the voice of the Holy Spirit. So
good.
Now we're playing catch up. We're playing picking up on the pieces now.
Sure.
We had, there's been church hurt in our kids. There's been church issues. There's been questions. We remember, Chase, I don't know if you remember this, but our generation, we weren't really allowed to ask questions, because if you asked questions, it meant that you doubted your faith. And so we were quickly reprimanded. I mean, you didn't even realize how Catholic, you were not raised Catholic, but in a way, look, if you ask the wrong question, you are, you're pointed out. Like, that's not the right question you should be asking.
Right.
And so we penalized, like, people that ask questions, like, don't ask those questions. So
yeah,
that was our generation. And now it's like, are you kidding me? I mean, there's a lot of great questions with no answers.
Right.
Don't just give me a scripture, which I had handed to me. I had a really hard question about stuff, and then they'd hand me here's the scripture, and I read it. It's like, that has nothing to do with what I just asked you.
Yeah.
So, that's the word of God. Well, why are you misapplying it?
Right. Well, so
that's all I got.
So I mean, you just said an absolutely massive thing that I think when I think about the relationships in my own life, I have so many relationships connected to, I would say, parents in your season with
Yeah.
kids my age, or maybe a little younger, a little older,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they are walking through or have walked through a very similar thing, and are kind of scratching their head, and also wrestling with their own disappointment, probably a little bit of their own self-regret, but also, and through other, other experiences of different people I can think of as well, just that sense of like, where did I go wrong? What did I do wrong? And, or I don't feel like I did anything wrong. And this is just a messed up generation. And they had the wrong influences that swooped in, and, internet or TikTok or Instagram, social media, and all these different things are polluting their mind. And then it's like the wedge between mom and dad and adult child or adult grandchild is continuing to get wider and wider and wider. And what I continue to see where the gap continues to widen is there also seems to be a large lack of relational skills to be able to bridge that difference of, or acknowledging, man, maybe there could have been some things we did differently, and we may not agree with everything that you're doing right now or believing right now, or not doing or not believing, but we have a maturity and we have enough relational tools that we are going to stay in this thing with you and do what we can to remain relational no matter what.
Absolutely.
Right? Because that, at the end of the day, whether you want to talk about, the parable of the prodigal son, or you want to find other places in scripture, like there is something about Jesus's ability to stay with people, even while they at times are going the wrong direction. I'm thinking about the road to Emmaus. Like those guys were going the wrong way that Jesus said to go, and yet he walked with them for a while until they had their eyes open to who he really was. There's this character trait in God through the prodigal son, Father God, and etc. So there's got to be that ability, and yet there's these values, and there's these convictions, and there's these voice of God things that align with the word of God things that can't be compromised and equal life because of the way that God has put things into motion. And so that is something that I know so many people are in right now, and just going like, somebody help me. I feel like I'm losing my kids, and I may be even losing my grandkids because they have my grandkids and I don't have any relationship with them. And yet they're wondering, are they compromising their own belief in God and beliefs on what God has said in order to tolerate or be around or with a child that doesn't see things the same way? I have so many questions to this, but I guess the big one is, here's what I see, right? I see your family and your 3 children and adult children and grandkids. And, I mean, Matt and David, but Matt was a closer friend for years. And as I was younger, I mean, he was one of my dudes, and always he was a couple years older than me. So just a guy I just looked up to, and just so much fun. I mean, hilarious and so much fun. That dude, I would be laughing. Anyway, this picture I've seen through years is a family that continues to be together and enjoy being together and celebrate it. Like even through, an annual trip to Tahoe that I know you guys do. I mean, watching and seeing the videos or the pictures that come out of those trips on Facebook or whatever, and the joy that is on those faces. It's not fabricated. It's not manufactured. There is a delight to be together out there and with each other, that I go, okay, so you're telling me you can be in ministry still and be pastoring a church in 2023 and have adult kids who have their own lives and their own, journeys and beliefs and opinions and all that, grandkids, but they could still all be together and maybe not all agree on everything. How is that happening? Because it seems like I don't see that in very many places and spaces.
Wow. I mean, that's new to me to hear that. I obviously we experience it, but couple things. I mean, I think it's because I'm older. It's as I get older, we've got some weird things going on in generations. I just told Robin probably today or yesterday, it's like we should have never labeled the generations. We should never have done this. This has been probably the biggest mistake, is to label generations and give them names. And all of a sudden we're like, well, okay, boomer.
Right.
Oh, all right. I don't know what all I don't know what the names
Yeah.
and all that, but probably shouldn't have. But what I do know is that longevity, so the years that people now live longer, have caused a major 4 to now 5 generations trying to control the church, what direction it goes, and spirituality. And that's a mess.
Yeah.
Because you have people that are actually in their 90s still, Chase, that are still pretty good in their mind, not so great in their body. And they're like, if you kids just did what we did, you guys you'd make it. You'd be better. And it's a heartbreak to tell them that's just not true.
Right.
They don't understand that.
Right.
If you just went back to hymns, and if you just went back to this, and if you just did church the way that we did church, and if you just went to church every night of the week or several nights a week, and if you just did this, then the whole country would be good. And it's just a heartbreak to tell them that's not true.
Yeah.
That's just not true.
It's not true.
And it is the hardest thing in the world for them to let go of the fact that every generation has to have its own struggle against the previous generation, against their own whatever, their political, their social climate. They're all different. Their own wars, their own issues. Every generation has to face that. They face it. And this generation is no different.
Right.
There were bad things then, there are bad things now. We are, lest we forget, we're in a war, lest we forget the biggest lies, the biggest guns that the enemy, that Satan is bringing out in this generation.
Yeah.
They're not surprising. The biggest lies that we have going on in our lives and our country right now, they're the biggest lies because we want them in our life.
Yeah.
All these things about sexuality, all these things about identity, all these things about, just on and on you go. They're the biggest lies. We want them. There's something in us that craves to not do things God's way. It's in me. It's in you.
Yeah.
We all crave it. A number, you probably read the same authors, that this disordered desires.
Right.
Right? They're all there.
Yep.
And this generation is just feeding off of these disordered desires and wanting them to make them the right thing to do, the right way to go. And it's just not going to work.
Right.
It's not going to work.
Right.
I tell people all the time, the pot at the end of the rainbow is a toilet. It is not gold. You're chasing the wrong promise, man.
Yeah.
It ain't going to work.
Yeah. That's so true.
I believe prophetically, man, I believe that God will pour out his spirit, and it may be bigger or better or different than the Jesus revolution. But every time something like this happened, God just pours out his spirit and directly begins to connect with men and women and boys and girls, and just phenomenally just overpowers the lies and the nonsense. And I believe that's coming. Our job, I just want to make sure the church is ready to receive, just like you said, just like the Father. I want us running out in open arms and saying, come on home, man.
Yeah.
Come on home.
Yeah.
I'm not going to talk about your sins. I'm not going to talk about your past. I'm not going to talk about the things you blew and the money you blew. No, I'm glad you're home. Let's celebrate.
Yes. Amen. Man, that's
so I think that junction's coming. That's why this whole resurfacing of being a disciple and making a disciple is so prevalent. We've gotten so church-centric that we have forgotten the core of the gospel is in individuals.
Yep.
And we gather together as a celebration. We're trying to do that right now in our church. It's like, I don't want us to come together as the inspiration. I want us to come together as the celebration.
Yeah, it's so good.
The inspiration's what's supposed to be happening 6 days a week.
Right,
Let's come together and be the church to celebrate. But if you think that the church building or the gathering is the end all be all, we're going to save all your friends. We're going to disciple all your friends. We're going to turn and convert all your friends. We're going to do all this stuff. Just bring them here. And your pro pastors, your professional leaders are going to do all that. That's just crazy.
Yeah.
The Bible was never designed that way.
No. But
the church was never designed this way.
But what to your point? But we have watched, and this isn't throwing rocks because I've been a part of it. but I believe over the last 20 to 30 years, 15 to 20 years, we have put together a lot of incredible packages and programs and systems that support more of what you just described we aren't supposed to do. Not everything, but I would say when I look at it, I go, we did a lot of things that felt like we were communicating the message at large that the church really was, not the church as in the church of the body, but like the church, the building. Yeah. We have made a pretty strong communication to the world that the church building and the church people were the answer for all of those things. And so just come to this next event, come to this next conference, this next camp, this next retreat, this next service, and that will be, and not have as much of that intentional emphasis and development on really discipling people to make disciples. Yeah. That's part of what I've recognized is there's a shift happening. I mean, you're in it and you're dead on. And I love as somebody who's like, I still consider myself young in this space. I feel like I could keep doing that until I don't know when to stop. You tell me, when does it stop? When do I have to stop saying I'm a younger pastor? Because I feel like I'm 32 and it feels like that's gonna have to end pretty quickly. I felt like 30 was it, but now I still feel young, and so I don't know if that's gonna go away. But to hear somebody that's been in ministry longer than I've been alive go and say what you just said is so encouraging to me, because the reality is too, Pastor Glenn, like there's going to be, and I'm sure you have younger probably men and women in your church at times, or even on your team, who are also looking around and going like, who is older than me, that's been in this, that's willing to see this as well this way, without just pushing this out and being like, we've got to just get back. We just got to get back to what we've always done. And what I'm also seeing in the ministry space is there's not a lot of pastors out there that have the security in their identity, in who they are, where God's called them, the humility, so security and humility to say, hey, let's come together on this. Like let's do this together, rather than no, I'm gonna go. You go start your own little young person, whatever church, and we're gonna just like come back to we're gonna start a new. Or you're not gonna do what I thought you were gonna do when I handed the church over. Well, we're gonna start our old church, the new old church again, and then there goes the generational gap. And I just go, personally, I feel so passionate about bringing those generations together, because I do really believe, man, that I think we're better together, and that the effectiveness of the gospel witness and all of that, right, can be more effective when I do have some fathers and mothers around me, some grandmothers and grandfathers around me who help me see things I can't see because they've been there and done that, but also are willing to go, hey, you're just as much a part of this thing now, and we need you, and because we need each other. We absolutely need each other for it to be the most effective for the gospel. This is really hard to do.
Our staff, we've got 5. Our staff, they're all in the 30s. We have an elderly person. She's 40. She's in her 40s. She's an elder.
Let's go.
She's the oldest. She feels it, but no, that's our staff. And just watching the church. I mean, I love church planters. I love church. I love church startups. We have friends that are doing this. So do you.
Yep. Right.
I love it. But a lot of times, what happened is they wanted a pastor, they wanted to lead, but there's no room in our current churches. And there's no room, not because the senior pastors wouldn't allow them to do it as much as it's like, no, they're too young. Right. They can't do it.
Right.
And so it's like, we've got this dilemma. It's like, what do you mean they're too young? I mean, anyways. And so what happened is they were willing, just like you, they were willing to say, look, I don't need your money. I don't need your building. I'm going to go out and do it anyways. Yeah. And it's hard. Yeah. Yeah. It's the hardest thing to do. Yep. And so I'm trying to create a church. We're doing a relaunch, but I'm trying to create a church within a church, because we've got folks there. We've got a lot of older folks there. We've got money. We've got a building, but those are not the things that are important. The important part is the next generation's coming up. They need to lead. Yep. And so I want to give them resources, and I want to give them the backing. I want them to make a lot of mistakes. Yep. And I want to say, you need to take this and run with it, because this is how it is supposed to do
Yeah.
this. It's like that whole system where Paul said, okay, Tim, you're ready. Paul handed Timothy a mess in Ephesus. You
Yeah.
know this.
Yeah, for sure.
It was a mess.
For sure.
And
Yeah.
he was young.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was risky.
Oh, big time. Yeah.
And he did fine.
Yeah.
Of course, they eventually killed him there in the city, but he did good. He pastored it until he died.
Right. Right.
But Paul handed it over to a young guy.
Yeah.
Quit doing this.
Yeah.
They're like, no, you're not old enough. You don't know enough. You're not mature enough. You're gonna this. You're gonna that.
Yeah.
It's like, no, that's just not.
Yeah.
So, and now we're in a crisis because these churches hanging on.
Yep.
They got more money than they do people.
Yep.
And they're dying. And they're like, we don't like this. It's like, well, that's because you won't let go of the past.
Yeah.
You've held onto the container too long.
Yeah.
The old wineskin, you've held on to it. Then that's God's just not he's not gonna do anything.
Yeah.
So
and I see too, and this is part of where I feel so burdened to be an advocate and a voice that can challenge my generation to say there's a that, and I don't think you would disagree with this per se, but I really do see both ends of this spectrum. I feel like God's given me a burden for both because of it takes somebody a younger person who also can be humbled enough to submit and to say, hey, I really don't know it all. And I'm okay acknowledging that and submitting myself to some leadership of somebody who may not do everything I think is the right way anymore or whatever else, but I'm moldable, I'm teachable, I'm correctable, I'm rebukable, but I'm also encourageable and build upable. And I think all of that stuff is important and matters. And I think there's a big absence of that, in our generation, if you will, and the youngers of I won't submit because I haven't developed the capacity to handle, my identity outside of my performance, and so the rejection that comes from any kind of critique or sharpening is too much to bear, and so I separate myself or I remove myself from any environments or relationships that could come. So I think I see that happening a lot. And the other one is, there really has been a pretty significant gap of healthy relationships in the way that the older generation I think also has been pursuing of that kind, because the trust that's been built across the generations and relationships, maybe with your generation, and I would go even the generation between me and you, which is probably not that much. It's actually, I'm thinking my parents, we're just a generation apart. Yeah. is that sense of, where trust came by title and position, right? In your generation, teacher, professor, pastor, that's right, president, that trust across the generational landscape has been shattered for our generation. It's gone. Right? Because the integrity, the breakdown, the moral failures, all these different things that have been outside, outside image heavy, but behind closed doors, broken of character and integrity. The trust that's required for those healthy relationships is significantly different because of the titles and positions don't matter to us like they have in previous generations, but it takes time over time of healthier pursuit relationship that I know is part of it, right? So all of it though, Jesus is not caught by surprise by. No. And that is something I continue to take hope in knowing that, man, Lord, for whatever reason, I was born in 1991 and, I've got a church I mean, it just every Sunday blows my mind that there's probably 20, 25 people in our congregation that are like core part of our group, in their 75 to 90. And I'm going, man, it takes a lot of humility and grace for them every Sunday to sit and listen to me preach and go, we want to be here and be a part of this younger guys' church and ministry. And so there's just going to have to be some intentional bridging of the gap across the landscape, both sides, for us to be the bride that God's really called us to be, in this next season. And I just love, man, I love what you're doing. I love who you are. I love that God's using you in this season to be a gap bridger, a generational gap bridger. You have such a unique ability to do that in your ability to be I don't like using the word relevant because I think it's overused and can be misconstrued, but your ability to be able to communicate to the younger generations and be a father figure in a way that a lot of them didn't have. And then your ability to still listen, care for, serve the older generation that, has, like you mentioned, that you've just, your ability to be that gap bridger is unique. And I think it's a special call that God's got on your life. And I think I mean, without all the cliches, it is for such a time as this. And it's no accident. God's called you guys back to Life Center, and there's a relaunching of sorts, and that you've laid the groundwork long before being there this round. And man, I'm excited to keep watching from the outside, because I know, man, it's God's all over it. God is all over it. So
Nice.
Yeah. Well, one of the pieces that, just to conclude, man, for today's conversation, when I think about the things that have held back people from being who they were made to be, I mean, it feels like when I think about your life now, from what I can see, you're walking in a lot of confidence in who you are, and it doesn't feel like you're doing it for anybody and their approval. It feels like you're who Glenn Garvin is, his identity as a son of God, as a follower of Jesus, as a husband, as a father, as a pastor, that there's a lot of just healthy confidence and security coming out of you in this season of your life in that way. In other words, it feels like you're walking in who you were made to be. Is there something that you would say, man, in your life, maybe in previous seasons or even that you've overcome recently, that has held you back from being who you were made to be, in that now you're walking? And how did you overcome that, or how are you overcoming that, as people would listen and go, man, maybe it's a similar thing than what they might be wrestling with or have wrestled with?
That is, thank you. I appreciate.
Yeah.
I appreciate the encouragement from you.
Yeah.
You are an encourager. I hear it. I mean, I definitely, I stepped into my 40s wrestling with that. Truly, like I definitely, I cannot escape my past. I mean, there was a lot of things that I just thought, I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to make it in marriage. I'm definitely not going to make it as a father. Those were both very big fears. To get married, to marry a PK, to a pastor's kid,
right,
to marry a pastor's daughter, to have PKs, to have children that are under the ministry as clergy. That was scary. And really, in my past, it kept feeling like this is all going to blow up. And so there was just really this sense that it was just not, I'm just surprised. I'm surprised I got this far. What I can tell you is, when God changes a life, and he can do it thoroughly, but you've got to stick with him. You've got to stick with him through failure. You've got to stick with him through setbacks. You all know now, this as well, Chase. Christianity is not a straight line from the beginning to the end. It's a big scribble.
Yeah.
It looks like a scribble.
Yeah.
It looks like there's as much going backward as there is going forward. But the second point I want to tell you, one, is that God can do what he says he's going to do in us.
Yeah.
He will. He can do it. He's got the power to do it. He's got the grace to do it, the mercy to forgive us. He can do it. The second thing is, I don't care how many times you fall. I don't care how many times you find yourself down in the gutter, depressed. You've got something that's controlling you, something that's not working, something that keeps coming up. I don't care. Get back up.
Yeah.
Get back up. I swear that probably 99% of spirituality is grit and determination. Like, I'm just going to get back up. I'm going to believe God, and I'm just going to take that step. I'm going to go forward.
Yeah.
I'm not going to stay down. I'm not going to wallow. I'm not going to blame. I'm not going to look back. I'm just going to get up, and I'm going to keep on walking.
Yeah.
So those are the two things.
So good. So good, man. I'm just so privileged to get to sit down today and get to hear, even your story. I've heard pieces of it, but again, to hear it in that kind of that run, even though it, lots of things it could fill in between, but just that, and to see the work of God in his hand and work in your life and your family, and It's just awesome. It's so
Yeah.
cool, man. So thanks for sharing with us today. Thanks for sharing your time, your journey, your heart and experience, being vulnerable in some of those things, and thanks for believing in me and my family too, because I know I've felt it. I've felt it in different ways throughout the years. You know, the relationship with my family, my parents, but I've felt it, man. There's been moments of encouragement that you've shared over the years.
We're proud of you.
Yeah, I can feel it. It means a lot. It means a lot to me. So love you guys, praying for you, and man, just what a privilege to connect with you today. So thank you for joining me on today's episode, and for those listening, thank you for listening. I got my buddy Weston jumping in the back. Can you say goodbye?
Hey Weston.
Can you hear him?
Yeah, man.
Say good to see you.
Good to see you.
Hey, I found out I wrote a book called A Seed of Hope in Toxic Soil. And I found out if you go to Amazon, apparently it's free. So I know it's great. It's like, okay, it's just so old. It came out like in 2012. And now it's free. So if you want to read the cool stories about my life, and definitely Royal Family Kids, it's in there.
Yeah.
Seed of Hope in Toxic Soil. Look up my name, Glenn Garvin, on Amazon. It'll direct you there.
Yeah. Will you? And I hope by the time people listen to the podcast and they go, it's not free, so they can buy it to support the incredible.
Well, it's free. It's actually, it's free. Amazon decided it's so old, it's free.
But man, also just for people to get, when I think about staying connected to you and reaching out, there's, you have a website. That's is that a good place for people to go to just find more information about the book, or about where you're at, some of your story, or even just a way to get connected? So that's hopebroker.com.
That's it.
www.hopebroker.com. I'll put all the links in the show notes as well for people that are listening. It'd be easy to click and make sure that. But yes, the book unpacks more of the story that you're not gonna regret going to get that book. It shouldn't be free, because I mean it's an impactful one that people will not regret taking the time to get and read. So man, yes, thanks for that. And until next time, for everybody listening, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.